pleasure, chala, flickering and temporary. Translation and purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki. One's riches, beautiful wife and female friends, one's sons and daughters, one's residence, one's domestic animals like cows, elephants and horses, one's treasury, economic development and sense gratification, indeed even the lifetime in which one can enjoy all these material opulences are certainly temporary and flickering. Since the opportunity of human life is temporary, what benefit can these material opulences give to a sensible man who has understood himself to be eternal? Please repeat. One's riches, beautiful wife and female friends, one's sons and daughters, one's residence, one's domestic animals like cows, elephants and horses, one's treasury, economic development and sense gratification, indeed, even the lifetime in which one can enjoy all these material opulences are certainly temporary and flickering. Since the opportunity of human life is temporary, what benefit can these material opulences give to a sensible man who has understood himself to be eternal? Purport. This verse describes how the advocates of economic development are frustrated by the laws of nature. As the previous verse asks, Kim Vishayo Papadanai, what is the actual benefit of so-called economic development? The history of the world has factually proved that attempts to increase economic development for bodily comfort through the advancement of material civilization have done nothing to remedy the inevitability of birth, death, old age, and disease. Everyone has knowledge of huge empires throughout the history of the world, the Roman Empire, the Mughal Empire, the British Empire, and so on. But all the societies engaged in such economic development, Saveriha Kama, have been frustrated by the laws of nature through periodic wars, pestilence, famine, and so on. Thus, all their attempts have been flickering and temporary. In this verse, therefore, it is said, Kuranti Machyasya Kiat Priyam Chala. One may be very proud of possessing a vast empire, but such empires are impermanent. After 100 or 200 years, everything is finished. All such positions of economic development, although created with great endeavor and hardship, are vanquished very soon. Therefore, they have been described as chala. An intelligent man should conclude that material economic development is not at all pleasing. The entire world is described in Bhagavad Gita as dukhalayam ashasvatam, miserable and temporary. Economic development may be pleasing for some time, but it cannot endure. Thus, many big businessmen are now very morose because they are being harassed by various plundering governments. In conclusion, why should one waste his time for so-called economic development, which is neither permanent nor pleasing to the soul? On the other hand, our relationship with Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is eternal, Nitya Siddha Krishna Prem. The pure souls are eternally in love with Krishna, and this permanent love, either as a servant, a friend, a parent, or a conjugal lover, is not at all difficult to revive. Especially in this age, the concession is that simply by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, Harinama, Harinama, Harinama Eva Kevalam, one revives his original relationship with God and thus becomes so happy that he does not want anything material. As enunciated by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Nadanam Najanam Nasundarim Kavatam Va Jagad Ishya Kamaye. A very advanced devotee in Krishna consciousness does not want riches, followers, or possessions. Vaya Kalatram Pashava Sutta Dayo Graha Mahi Kunjali Kosha Bhutaya. The satisfaction of possessing material opulences, although perhaps of a different standard, is available even in the lives of dogs and hogs who cannot revive their eternal relationship with Krishna. In human life, however, our eternal dormant relationship with Krishna is possible to revive. Therefore, Prahlad Maharaj has described this life as Tadam. Consequently, instead of wasting our time for economic development, which cannot give us any happiness, if we simply try to revive our eternal relationship with Krishna, we will properly utilize our lives. Om Gyan Tamandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmritanyena Tasma Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dati Swapadantam. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Javapate Gopisha Gopakanta Radha Kanta Namaste Vanchakalpa Ubhischa Kripa Sindhu Evacha Patitanam Pavebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Repeating the verse. One's riches, beautiful wife and female friends, one's sons and daughters, one's residence, one's domestic animals like cows, elephants, and horses, one's treasury, economic development and sense gratification, indeed even the lifetime in which one can enjoy all these material opulences, are certainly temporary and flickering, since the opportunity of human life is temporary. What benefit can these material opulences give to a sensible man who has understood himself to be eternal? Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Stai Bhutale Shimati Shri Parama Swami Nityanande. So this chapter is entitled What Prahlad Learned in the Womb. And what did he learn in the womb, or who did he learn it from? And that was Narada Muni. So straight away we see the Guru Parampara is here, that Narada Muni is not speculating, but he's sharing what he learned from Narada Muni, which is the proper process, because in this day and age there's so many people who are self-proclaimed gurus, and this is not acknowledged or recognized as a bona fide process, but we should follow in a disciplic succession, as Prahlad Maharaj is doing here. And also, we are also following in Prahlad Maharaj's footsteps, because this is the Vyasa-san, or the seat of Vyas. And Vyasa Dev, the literary incarnation of Krishna, we're following in his footsteps with our teachings. And if anyone is on Vyasa-san and speaking adverse to the teachings of the Guru Parampara, then it's appropriate for a senior Vaishnava to point that out and bring correction, so we can keep in that alignment, because it's very easy to deviate from the teachings, especially in this age of Kali. Deviation can happen very quickly, and we've seen it in our movement also. So it behooves a senior Vaishnava to actually bring in that correction to help keep that alignment, so Prabhupada's teachings can remain pure, because he is the Shiksha Guru for ISKCON for the next 10,000 years. So we're all here just to follow in his footsteps. So it's interesting, we're on verse 39 now, of what Prahlad learned in the womb. So he's teaching his childhood friends. And there's a great similarity when we go to the early verses of this chapter, that Prahlad Maharaj, his first teachings was, who am I? And this is the foundation of the teachings of Krishna consciousness, or Sanatana Dharma, is to understand our original constitutional position as eternal spirit soul. Because if we don't understand that, nothing else will really make sense. And the example can be given of a long mathematical equation that is in many parts, and if the first part is wrong, even if the next parts are correct, the conclusion will still be wrong. So also with understanding ourselves, if we don't understand who we are as eternal spirit soul, understanding our 5 material elements that make up the physical body, the 3 subtle elements, apiram atrastranam plakadimavidi but there's a superior energy of that which comprises the living entities. So it's just having that understanding of who we are as the foundation of Krishna consciousness. And that's also how Prahlad started in this chapter to his school friends. And we see that correlation in the Bhagavad Gita as well, when Arjuna, there's a pivotal point in the Bhagavad Gita, as we know, in chapter 2, text 7, when Arjuna says, Kapanya dospat swabhava prachmitram dharma samudicetaha yachtra sayandichiham bruhitame sisyasteham sadiman tvam prapanam. Now I'm confused about my duty, and I've lost all composure because of my weakness. In this condition, asking you to tell me for certain what is best for me. Now I'm your disciple and a soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me. So it's at this point that Arjuna changes the relationship with Krishna, because Krishna and Arjuna were cousins. And not only were they cousins, but they were best friends. And in that relationship or friendship, it's very hard to instruct a person, because the dynamic, the mood is different. So it wasn't until this point of perplexity that Arjuna finally surrendered and accepted Krishna as his teacher or his guru. And that's when Krishna now could start imparting knowledge properly to learn, and that's the proper system of guru-disciple. And then in chapter 2, text 12, he starts with Nacheva Hamjatuna Sam, Natwan Janatakaha, Nacheva Vishnu Savevam Mataparam, that never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. So there, Krishna is starting the teachings about the eternal nature. And then he goes on in the next verse, Dehino Sminyatate Kamram Yoganamjala. He talks about reincarnation, how we're transmigrating from body to body. And then in those next 18 verses, it's all about the nature of the soul, how it can't be burnt by fire, can't be moistened by water, it can't be cut by any weapon. So he's really emphasizing who we are and what is our true nature, to give us that solid foundation, because without that, we can't really grow in our understanding of Krishna consciousness. And that's why Srila Prabhupada emphasized that so much, again and again, because it never sunk in so easily. So we had to keep hearing it again and again. So now what do we do with that understanding? Now we know we're eternal spirit souls. How do we act in that capacity? So Prahlad then goes on to say, by constant engagement in Krishna consciousness, we can become purified and revive our original constitutional position as eternal servants of Krishna. And this constant engagement is necessary, because if we're not constantly engaged in Krishna consciousness, then we're going to be engaged in something else that's outside of Krishna consciousness, and that's going to be Maya, or engaged in some aspect of Maya, serving the senses, serving the mind's desires. So Prabhupada set up these centers, temples, that we can take full advantage, because it's very hard to be fully engaged in Krishna consciousness without proper training. So these centers are here to train us up how we can be Krishna conscious from the time we wake up till the time we go to bed. And this is necessary, Chaita Darpana Marjanam Bhava Mahatavagnin Vapanam, to clean the heart. It's necessary to be fully engaging in this process of Harinam Sankirtan. And it's very easy. Prahlad said it's very easy, and one aspect, because we're very fortunate as devotees, we understand Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagwan, so we understand the three aspects of the divine, where not all spiritualists do. Some people only understand the Brahman aspect or the Paramatma, but we understand all three. So we can take advantage, Prahlad was saying, of that Paramatma understanding, to know that Krishna is in our heart. Krishna is in everyone's heart. Krishna is everywhere. He's in every atom. So we can see Krishna everywhere. He's the taste in water. So we can look within, because many times we look out of ourselves for answers, but actually all the answers lie within us as a Chaita Guru in our heart. Krishna's there to reveal to us We just need to go through the layers of coverings that stop us from that connection through the material mind, the intelligence, and especially the false ego. When we see that verse, Bhumya Ponalo Baya, it starts with earth and ends with the false ego, because the earth is the most gross and the false ego is the most subtle. So it's the hardest one to grasp, but it's very important to understand how this false ego works, so we can surpass it and understand our real ego as eternal servants. And this is where Vaishnava etiquette actually is very important, because we learn knowledge, and knowledge is fundamental in understanding philosophy. But without Vaishnava etiquette, the knowledge doesn't have the same potency, because the Vaishnava etiquette develops character. So the caterpillar said to the butterfly, "You've changed," and the butterfly said, "We're supposed to change." So it's the same as we come into Krishna consciousness. We come in with our baggage, and through this process, it's a cleansing process. So that baggage should be getting more and more removed, and we should be feeling lighter and more clear. And it's not just a physical, but it's a subtle as well, and the spiritual. And someone who is more dull, they can't tap into the subtle energies, and especially the spiritual energy. But this is very important, and that's why Vaishnava etiquette is important, because then we know how to function in society. And because we live in communities here, or whether it's family life or wherever it is, we have relationships, and if we don't know who is who, then we'll be acting inappropriately. And not only does that not serve us and serve the community, but there's a chance of committing Vaishnava aparad. And as we know, Vaishnava aparad is the mad elephant offense. And if you let a mad elephant into your garden, everything's ruined. So same with Vaishnava aparad. Even though we may not be aware, and it may be just subtle, it will still have an accumulative effect. And eventually, if it continues, then Krishna removes us from the society of devotees until we can rectify ourselves. So the core of Vaishnava etiquette is humility. It's like the jewel on the crown. You know, you have a beautiful golden crown, but the jewel is what shines out, the big emerald or the sapphire or the ruby. And the golden crown is like the forgiveness and compassion and tolerance and patience, which are all necessary. But the jewel is like the humility. You know, that's the jewel of the crown. And to develop humility is a very good quality, but sometimes it can seem elusive. Like, what is humility? Because there's false humility as well. So then we can sometimes get caught up in being falsely humble. So it's a process that we enter into, and we're very fortunate because Vaishnava is very tolerant. So they tolerate our offenses. And if we know we have made an offense, all we have to do is apologize, and Vaishnavas are quick to forgive. So Prahlad mentioned in a recent verse, just a few verses ago, does anyone remember about these 6 enemies he spoke about within us? Does anyone remember any of these 6 enemies that Prahlad spoke about in the previous verse? Lust, yes. Anger, greed. So those are the 3 big ones. Lust, anger, and greed are like the 3 pathways to hell. But the other 3 he mentioned as well was illusion, madness, and jealousy. So he spoke, and it's interesting because sometimes when we think of enemies, we're always looking out of ourselves. Where's the enemies? They're my enemy. This is my enemy. Because it's never ourself. It's always someone else or something else. And we play the victim a lot. We play that victim role, and it's always someone else's fault, and they're the enemy. But actually here Prahlad is saying, no, your enemies are within yourself. So if you look into yourself, you'll see the enemies. And Krishna actually says that this lust, this is its dwelling place in the mind and the intelligence. So he shows us where we can find the enemies within ourselves. Jai Shri Shri Kodantai Mai Posashi Ki. So this is really important, to take responsibility for our actions, and try and curb our anger, our lust, our greed. Prabhupada teaches, in the 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, it's very beautiful, because there's a lot about the mind, about controlling the mind, and how when we can control the mind, that all the senses naturally come under our control. So sometimes I think, well, how can I stop this, or how can I control that? It all comes back to the mind, because we know it's the process is thinking, feeling, willing. So if we can catch it in the thinking stage, then we burn it in its seed form, so it doesn't have a chance to fructify. And this is why constant engagement in Krishna consciousness is so important, because the material mind is so stubborn, and it's been so used to being the controller, where the true nature of the mind is to serve. It's to serve the greater whole. Like when we put food in the stomach, it's to serve the body. So the mind is also there to serve us, but it's had a tendency to take over, and now it controls us, and it wants to be the leader. And that creates a very difficult situation for us, because it's like an enemy within us. But it's not the mind, it's the lust within the mind and our material desires, which are the problem that manifest in the form of thoughts. So when we're engaged like this constantly, we have more of an opportunity to catch the mind, because it doesn't have so much of a free rein. When we're out in the world and everything's a bit more loose, the mind can take us here, the mind can take us there more easily. But when we're in society of devotees, everything's tightened up, and that's for our benefit. And that's why we choose to be here, because it's going to assist us in our spiritual life. And actually it makes life easier. That this is, as Adoksaja Prabhu said yesterday, this is actually the easy path. Even though sometimes it doesn't feel like it, it is actually the easy path. Life in the material world is very difficult, and it's full of suffering, and it's miserable, and people are suffering. Some people seem happy, and yeah, those who are more in the mode of goodness, one of the symptoms of the mode of goodness is happiness. But still, Prabhupada, he doesn't glorify that. He doesn't glorify philanthropic works, mode of goodness, because it's still binding to the material world. And this is transcendental knowledge. This is the highest knowledge to set us free from samsara, or repeated birth and death. So Prabhupada has come with the pure teachings, and likewise here, Prahlad has come with the pure teachings, which brings us to this verse, where he's given a foundation to his school friends, how we're not this body, but we're eternal spirit soul. And now he's building up to the here now, where he's really going deeper, saying everything you're going to get in this world is going to get taken at the time of death. Everything you're working for so hard, all that striving to accumulate all this wealth, to make your friends, to bring up your family, to build your house, everything you're doing is just going to get taken at the time of death. So it's all futile. It's all futile. All that suffering you have to go through for what? Just to die and lose it all at the end of your life. So he's saying here, it's not the goal of life to do that. The goal of life is to understand, who am I? Who is God, Krishna? What's my relationship with him? And how can I revive that relationship and enter back into this eternal loving service? And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu very mercifully appeared in West Bengal in Mayapur in 1486, Yoga Pit. And Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj, when he was taken there, he was very old at the time, in a basket. But when he came to Mayapur, to the Yoga Pit, he came in ecstasy, and he jumped out his basket and revealed the birthplace of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And when he appeared, because of the eclipse, everyone was chanting the Maha Mantra, and said even Muslims were chanting, and it was very auspicious, because he came as the Yuga avatar to establish the Yuga Dharma. Harinama, Harinama, Harinama eva kevalam, Kalau nastya eva nastya eva nastya eva gati anyata. That there's no other way. In the Satya Yuga, people reached realization through meditation, in Treta Yuga through opulent sacrifices, in Dwapara Yuga through deity worship. In this Kali Yuga, because it's a very difficult time to practice spiritual life, that this chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra is a very easy way to revive our Krishna consciousness. And what do we do with all this if we have treasury and what wife and horses, and that's the beauty of this philosophy. We don't have to actually reject anything. We engage in the principle of yukta vairagya, or dovetailing everything in Krishna's service, because Srila Rupa Goswami said when we reject everything, it's a incomplete form of renunciation. But many people, when they come to the spiritual path, they think that's what renunciation means. You have to give everything up. But he gave a very beautiful understanding. It's very balanced and complete. Say, no, you use everything in Krishna's service, because ultimately everything can be spiritualized. I heard that my Guru Maharaj once, when he was in Canada many years ago, they were having a program at, I think, the Montreal Temple, and their flyer said, we're going to transform in front of your eyes matter into spirit. So lots of people came because they're intrigued. How are they going to perform this magic? And they offered the food, and the food became prasadam and became spiritualized. And so it wasn't exactly what the people were expecting, but this is the science of Krishna consciousness, that everything can be spiritualized, even our riches, our house, whatever we have, we don't have to give it up. We just use it in Krishna's service. But for many people, it's very difficult to come to Krishna consciousness because they bought into the illusion of material life. And they've bought into it so much, to withdraw and retract is a very difficult thing to do, because they have to admit that they're wrong, and people don't like to admit they're wrong. So they'll just carry on and be all in, even though they're on the pathway to hell. And this is the unfortunate situation. But we have been blessed because we have come in contact with this Krishna consciousness movement by the mercy of the Vaishnavas, because we have our three gurus, and our Bhatma Pradakshina Guru is very important, because that's a person who connects us to Krishna. And who is that person? That would be individual for each of us. And we may not even really see that person again. It might be someone who just gives us a book on the street, but that's our Bhatma Pradakshina Guru who connects us with Krishna. And that person is very special amongst our three gurus, Shiksha Diksha. And it's by the mercy of the Vaishnavas that we get this connection to Krishna consciousness. It's by their hard endeavor. It's Guru Kripa. And we should always be grateful for Prabhupada. He was the general who came to the West to give us these teachings, to establish the spiritual world within this material world, an ambassador of the spiritual world. And these centers are also embassies of the spiritual world. So when we come to these centers, we're actually, like, I thought I was in the spiritual world when I came to Kaluna Bhavan here, and then I heard Scottish accents around me, and it made me feel that actually it's like a Scottish part of the spiritual world. But here it's very beautiful. It's very beautiful to be landed at Kaluna Bhavan, because Prabhupada initially came to create brahmanas, and he had lots of centers in the cities. But the second part of his mission was actually Varnashram Dham, to establish farm communities. And this is very, very dear to Srila Prabhupada's heart. And he has foresight, and he knows that at some point people are going to be leaving the cities in great numbers, because here it says in this purport that the mercantile man, the business people, they're very miserable because the government plunders their riches. And that's what we experience, even if we're an honest businessman in the world. And we work hard because of this Kali Yuga government, they'll come and take a big chunk of our riches. So they make life very difficult. They don't just ask for 10%. They come and take a huge lot. And it's getting more and more difficult for people in general, that more and more people are becoming sick. The illusion of happiness is actually crumbling, that people know they're not happy. Mental illness is on the rise at an alarming rate. Depression, anxiety, stress, PTSD, and the list goes on and on. People are getting chronic fatigue because their whole body is just shutting down because the soul is not being nourished. Because the soul can be compared to the bird in the cage, and the person cleans the cage very nicely but neglects to feed the bird, and the bird starts to wither up and die. So that bird is like our soul, which when it's not nourished, it starts to wither up and die. And that's what happens to people in the material world, that their soul is not being nourished, and that they have all material facilities, but yet they're still miserable because that their soul is not being nourished. So more people will be leaving the cities, and they'll be coming to communities like this, and it'll get so desperate that they'll be coming for food. And the devotees, through Prabhupada's mercy, have that foresight to start establishing these farm communities and growing food, which is a very important service. It's said that book distribution is the highest service, and it is. But also cleaning the rooms down there for the Airbnb is the highest service as well. And growing the food is the highest service, and cleaning the temple floor is the highest service. There's been some great preaching I've seen here in the last few days, that with some of the volunteers, they've been coming volunteering on the farm, and they've been very interested in philosophy of Krishna consciousness. Like at least 2 have said that they came here because it's a spiritual community and they wanted to be in a spiritual community. And a 3rd one because it's an eco farm and they want to live more off-grid and understand the principles of living more self-sufficiently. So already people are coming here not just as a volunteer like a regular woofer working abroad, but because it's a spiritual community and people are seeking for this spiritual knowledge. And just by them being here, they're getting so much mercy, because this whole Karuna Bhavan is an ocean of mercy, and they're being permeated by this spiritual vibration that permeates this whole community. So they're in association with devotees, they're honoring Prashadam. And yesterday, this lady from the Airbnb came, and they've been traveling up north, doing nature walks. They're quite in the mode of goodness for people. And she wanted to make a donation, so I brought her into the temple. And the moment she walked into the conservatory, she was like, wow, this is such a beautiful room. But it's only the temple conservatory. And then when she came into the temple, she literally was stunned. She walked in, just stopped and didn't say anything. She was stunned and speechless. And that's the actual word she gave. Once she came out of that, she said, I was stunned and speechless because of the beautiful spiritual atmosphere. She stepped in. It was like, for her, probably never experienced this vibration, because everything carries vibration, and the temple is a spiritual vibration. So it's the purest vibration we can have. And because she lives very naturally next to the moors, she has a wood stove to start her cooking. So she lives a very simple life. And she's more tuned into the subtle energy. So when she stepped in here, she could really feel the vibration. And she came and said namaste and bowed before the deities to Prabhupada. So much good work is being done here with the Airbnb, with the volunteer program. Prabhupada would be very happy. Okay, so I'll stop there. Grantara Srimad Bhagvatam Ki. Srila Prabhupada Ki. So we have a few minutes if anyone has any questions, comments, or corrections. Yes, Prabhuji. Wow. Well, brahmachari, the training is very good, and when we look at the varnashram system, the first 25 years is traditionally brahmachari. And then after that, a man can decide whether to stay in saffron or they can go into white. But Prabhupada says in our movement, the grahastas are also brahmacharis. It's grahasta brahmachari. And he said it can be even more challenging being a grahasta brahmachari, living in a household situation and being removed from that. So it's actually very glorious, and women need protection. So to enter into the ashram and take on a wife and give her that protection, and especially if you had good training as a brahmachari, then that will serve you in the grihastha ashram. So it's also considered brahmachari. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Mhm. Mhm. Mm. Yeah, it's very good. It takes time to develop a society, and this society is still very young because it's for the next 10,000 years of this golden age, and we're still quite young into it. We're only 500 years into this golden age, and we're only 50 or 60 years into this movement. So it's still a very young movement, and a lot of mistakes have happened, which is understandable to try and establish a worldwide movement like this, and for young men and women who haven't had proper training from childhood to suddenly take on so much responsibility. It's, but we're learning from our mistakes, and all these things like what Jayadvaita Swami suggested there about having more elder vanaprasthas, it's only going to help our society become stronger, and it's what we need. We need a balanced society. We need more good grihastas, and we do need more elderly grihastas who can guide the younger ones through that transitional period, which is very challenging, because many young men, they come in, they think they're never going to get married, and then they're going to be brahmachari forever. And then when it dawns on them, actually, that's not their reality, it can be hard to make that adjustment. So we definitely need, and this is the Varnashram system, it's to create communities um, that can accommodate families as well, because I saw back to Dantamana happened a lot where there was no facilities in the temple for grahastas as well. So it makes it more difficult compared to, say, New Rajdam in Hungary, where the grahastas can live. They can be brahmachari living in the community, then they become grahasta and they carry on living in the community. So not so much changes, and they can have a good spiritual foundation carrying on in their life. But at temples where that facility isn't there, then when they leave, not only are they leaving the temple, they're also changing ashram, and now they have to create a livelihood, and so many things come on, it can create a bit of a meltdown and just shake them too much that they're not able to stay steady through that transition, and it can either take them a long time to come back on the path, or maybe they don't, they get too caught up in the material world. So definitely more guidance from the elders in that regard, and more farm communities where families can live as well, definitely benefit grihastas. Yes, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Mm. Mm. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Well, what can help is choosing a good wife, you know, because a good wife will help you become strong in yourself. You know, she won't allow it. She won't allow you to play. You know, she will help you become more Krishna conscious. And especially if that's your desire is to be more Krishna conscious, but that lust is pulling you for material sense enjoyment, but it's not your heart's desire, it's just a weakness of heart. Then a good wife will help you hold yourself. She'll be loving and compassion. So definitely, you know, choose your wife carefully. Mm. Brahmacharis are needed, grahastas are needed, vanaprasthas are needed, and sannyasis are needed. Everyone is needed, and everyone have their role to play, and every role is very important. And ultimately, everyone will find their own place, because we can't artificially be situated in somewhere where we don't belong. So if we try and do that, it will only last for a short amount of time, and eventually we have to find where we belong. So some people are naturally inclined towards brahmachari, and that ashram suits them, and they want to continue in that ashram. But either way, brahmachari training is very, very good. You know, it's ideal. Without brahmachari training, it's very hard to be a good grihasta. They say a good brahmachari makes a good grihasta. So that's a foundation. And then what an individual does from there, then that's just their journey in life unfolding. But nothing needs to be an impediment. You know, good grihastas, they've done so much amazing work in this society. It's not brahmachari grihasta. When Prabhupada wanted to have ISKCON established in London, he sent 3 grihasta couples. And it was those 3 grihasta couples that helped get this whole movement going from London. So, you know, grihastas are just as important as brahmacharis. Jai Prabhu. Mm. Mm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, simplicity is definitely a part of humility. You know, they're definitely interconnected. You know, living a simple life humbles a person, for sure. So I think it's Satsvarup Das Goswami wrote a very interesting book called The 26 Qualities of the Vaishnava. So there you can read more about these qualities. And okay, so we'll stop there. Thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Nitai Gaur Brahmanande, Gaur Bhaktavinda ki.